You briefly just mentioned to your friends about suffering and that a lot of people in the world are kind of struggling, which I think from my own experience, that seems very true, especially like if you look online or on social media or, you watch the news. It does seem like there is a large amount of suffering in the world, and a guy like yourself, you have like a vast amount of meditation experience, and obviously you're very introspective. For someone that's new or hasn't explored spirituality, or even just say meditation, or maybe they have but they haven't gone as deep as you have, is there any ways that you can kind of pick out core points and tips for them that isn't going to scare them away, but at the same time like almost like alleviate a little bit of that suffering that one might be facing in their life?
Yeah, so the most important thing is to realise that the vast majority of our suffering is psychological. So the vast majority of suffering is caused by the thinking. And for most people, before they get introduced to meditation or spiritual teachings, the thinking just runs by itself, and there's no way out of it. And so the suffering is caused by people being trapped in the thinking. They might not even realise it, and the reason they might not realise it is because that thinking is so uncomfortable that we distract ourselves with the phone, with the TV. So everyone's in a constant state of distraction because the thinking moving through the head is causing dissatisfaction, and at an even stronger level, suffering, and at an even stronger level than that, like mental health really challenges and crisis. So it's really important to become aware of the thinking. And that's the first step, just to become aware of the thoughts moving through your head. And if you just start watching the thinking and seeing the thinking, then instead of being the thinking, which is the suffering, instead of being identified with the thinking, you're the one who's aware of it. And it just creates this little bit of space inside. And that little bit of space is just, it's such a huge difference between being identified and caught in thinking and just being just aware of the thinking.
It's so freeing, isn't it? There's so much tension brought up in the mind. And would you almost argue that, I mean, obviously I'm saying this because I've explored this topic, but it seems to me from what you said that actually what we're looking for is within, but because of the fact that we haven't attended to it, because the mind is stuck almost on a loop that we are unable to control, by actually directing our attention into that and stopping it, that we see that, the nature of the mind in and of itself is peace. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the thoughts aren't peaceful. Thoughts aren't peaceful. But the thoughts aren't the mind. The thoughts are something, sometimes you might say thoughts of mind. Thoughts of the mind. That's one way of describing the mind, is the thoughts. But actually, the thoughts are happening within the mind. So the thoughts are happening within something which isn't thinking, because thoughts come and go. They move within your mind. So then you need to sort of investigate or sense into, all right, what is the field within which those thoughts are arising? Like, what is it? They must be arising within something. If you can see a thought, you can't be the thought. You must be the one who's aware of it. And those thoughts are arising in the true mind, which, as you say, is peace. Our natural state is peace. Yeah. As soon as the thinking drops, with every single human being in the whole world, if the thinking drops, there's peace. Peace is our natural state. And we've been taken over by the thinking. And it's just a pervasive human condition to have been taken over by the psychology. And that taking over by the psychology cuts you off from your being, and cuts you off from your connection to the rest of the world, and this shared love for the rest of the world and for the rest of humanity.
Yeah, very nicely said. I completely concur. Just going to let that sink in for a moment. It's beautifully put. Why does the mind take over, would you say? Why does it have that aspect to it, would you say? Because it does, and like you said, if someone tries to sit down and stop the mind for a second, they realise just how hard that is. Why is it so automated?
Well, there's probably many different ways that I could answer this question, but I'll just use one way, which is the mind gets its fuel from somewhere. How is the mind operating so so rampantly and so fast? Why is it moving so much? It gets its fuel from the body. It gets its fuel from the stored emotions and tensions and traumas in the body. A little baby, when they come into the world, they don't have that thinking mind to the same degree. But then when they're in the world, things happen and they have to contract down, and these energies of trauma and tension and tightness get laid down in the body, and that sort of creates this psychology in the mind. Actually, the psychology in the mind is a way to escape the feelings in the body. So yeah, it's the energy in the body which is fueling and creating the mind. So one way of working with this to kind of come out of that is to get really close to and get really used to and really come in to the emotions and the feelings in the body, and to meet them directly and to work with them. And if you work with the emotions and start working the emotions out of the heart, out of the belly, out of the body, then that mind doesn't have anywhere near the same level of fuel that it used to have. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that it's quite easy to underlook the impact of the body and its nature to the mind, and how that they're almost like interlinked. I was going to ask you a question without getting too deep. Is suffering inherently a bad thing?
Is suffering inherently a bad thing? Well, for a lot of people, suffering is what is necessary for us to awaken to our own being. We're going quite deep now. This is probably past. This is kind of deep. But for me, I would say I suffered a lot, and I'm not necessarily being like over dramatic. I really was in a really dark place in my early 20s, and I'm very, very, very thankful for it. And I'm still going through stuff. But it introduced me to my being. It introduced me to this inner smile, this place of goodness inside, which I don't need anything to be happy. Happiness is here in my heart. There's a sense of being at home. There's a sense of peace. And it was the suffering and the intensity of it which gave me the motivation to find something which is always free from suffering. So suffering can have a purpose and a use, which is to introduce us to our being. So it's not good to stay in a perpetual loop of suffering, obviously, because that's it isn't. No one
I
wants
agree
that.
We don't, because there is always something within inside of us that does want to almost look past our suffering, or at least alleviate it. There's something deep within that is almost undeniable with every human being. And I agree with what you're saying about that happiness is actually our natural state. It seems almost so like ludicrous to say such a thing, because there is so much suffering in the world. For that reason, would you feel as though that's changed the way you approach your life? Does it take away that kind of edge that you need to be successful all the time, or that
100%.
I feel as though, sorry to just like intercut, but the world really needs that, to hear that. And for me, I've definitely seen that 100%, but I don't see it embodied so much. What's your take on that?
Can you just repeat the question again?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm saying is, it doesn't feel as though that understanding is very prevalent in just the world, or you meet people. It seems like, even though if you was to sit and tell someone, oh yeah, happiness comes from within, you'll be like, yeah, no, that kind of makes sense. But then it's not actually actualized. Do you see what I'm saying? And actually, on top of that, how could someone like almost like start embodying that concept more?
What, that happiness is within?
Because it's such a great, amazing thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess usually someone only comes to really want to discover that when they're suffering enough. If you can get by,
it's like a precursor.
Yeah, if you can get by and you can kind of be okay and you can kind of have a general happy life by
the good's the enemy
playing
of
a
the
bit
great.
of tennis or whatever, watching a bit of Netflix, then you wouldn't really be motivated for it. But for someone who's really suffering, for someone who really wants it, you just start looking, and there's practices and techniques, and as soon as you get that little first taste of, oh, there's a peace inside, there's a joy inside, there's a happiness inside, which has nothing to do with anything external to me, then that little taste is like, yes, then you hone in on that, and then you know that's what you want, and you know that's the way you can go.
Yeah.
And then eventually, happiness is just here.
Mm-hmm.
It just becomes so obvious that happiness is your true nature, and that suffering is just a thin veil on top of it, because it is a thin veil. Even the deepest, darkest suffering is a thin veil compared to the vastness of the happiness that you are.
That's really nicely said, because when you do kind of have a brief glimpse into awareness, the ultimate samadhi, however you want to describe it, that release of tension from feeling this just like immeasurable suffering just gets totally released, and you realize, like you said, it was just a wave in an ocean or a speck in the sand, and it's like, whoa, and then you go back.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but I mean, for somebody who's really, really suffering, it doesn't feel like it's just a speck. The suffering doesn't feel like a speck. It feels like huge. It feels like the biggest thing ever. The suffering does.
Would you say it's almost as though it's overtaken the screen of awareness?
It can overtake the screen of awareness, but there's something beautiful about that. There's something really, really profound about that. Because for somebody who's really caught in suffering, then when they just taste their being, even the tiniest little taste of being, the contrast between the suffering and the freedom of being is so great that whoosh, the value goes there. And when you value it, it grows.
Do you know what's really funny? I was watching a video of a guy talking about, like, he's very into metaphysics and exploring non-duality, and he's done a lot of psychedelic trips, and he had seen through, I think, a mystical experience how one of the core aspects to reality and consciousness and its nature is actually a search for contrast. Exactly what you're saying. Because of that reason, you know, like people go in a sauna and then an ice bath, it's like that relief is so incredible. You know, if you haven't eaten for 2 days and you eat, like that kind of, and it's almost like a suffering can bring a contrast to light to add even more depth to the light, in a sense.
Yeah, and I think that's why we come here to Earth, because it is a dense place, so they say. I don't know, I don't remember heaven, or I don't remember the other realms, but it certainly seems very dense. And I think it's the contrast between the density that you can feel here and the light and brilliance of the light that you are. It's that contrast which then makes you, like a moth towards a flame, go towards and awaken to your being. It's the contrast. The contrast is everything.
Amazing. Yeah. So this is just a short interview that we just did on a whim. So
cool.
Anything else you want to say?
Thanks, man.
No, it was really nicely said. Yeah,
that was really interesting. Yeah.
A lot of beautiful topics, and sadly we don't have the time to continue. But
I'd just like to say one more thing that came up that I was going to talk about, but it didn't.
If you've got
when you have the perspective, like for me at a certain point, my perspective switched from I'm a victim to this suffering, my life's awful, I'm doomed, to I realised, okay, I'm on a spiritual journey, and suffering is somehow a good thing and can help with the spiritual journey.
Gives it a context.
And then it's something switched, and it's like, okay, how do I use every single challenge to awaken? I became obsessed with awakening, absolutely obsessed with freedom. How can I use any single challenge, no matter how hard, to awaken? And when that is your perspective, then you're not afraid of life anymore. Because true. Every challenge, I could be put in a prison cell, and it would only drive me deeper. You know,
I
everything
really like
can
that.
drive you deeper.
Have you ever read the book Extreme Ownership? I don't know if you've heard that, but by a Navy SEAL. He's quite famous. His name, Jocko Willink. I'm sure you're aware of him. But I remember reading that book, and one of the key insights that he had whilst on the battlefield was just always take full ownership of what's happening in the moment, which kind of, it does reflect in a sense that seeing that everything has a purpose, and it's actually kind of in a way, like you're saying, it's driving you towards a deeper sense of understanding about life, and actually it's all working in your favor, but it's all about that perspective, and not allowing the victim mentality to overtake your experience is so key to living a good life. It's so key. It's hard, isn't it? You know, because when things happen, you're like, I really didn't want this to happen, but like you say, if you can have that perspective, then actually you're like, oh no. And you probably agree. And how many times have you had something horrible happen, and you're like 10 years later, and someone wants to say, I will remove that now from that ever happening to you, you'd be like, no way, keep it in.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't want to change a single thing.
Yeah, it's nuts.
You wouldn't want to change a single moment of suffering.
Yeah.
When we're in it, we want it to go away.
Yeah.
But afterwards you would never change
it's nuts,
it. And almost everyone says that.
Yeah.
Not even people who are on the spiritual path.
Yeah.
Everyone gets lessons from these things.
That's really nice.
Most people do. I wouldn't say everyone.
Yeah,
some people are bitter and they wish it hadn't happened.
Well, that's actually a great point as well. It's like that what was it? The victim mentality can crystallize and still stay there. So that insight that you've just described, if someone is carrying something, maybe you could actually look at that and go, is it worth carrying? If it's something that's happened to you like 10 years ago, like I know, I won't say who, but I know someone that went for a divorce and they're still extremely bitter about it, like 20 years later, and it's no longer their experience, you know.
Yeah. We can hold on to things for a long time, and that's part of the process and part of the path as well. And at a certain point, you can even use that juice, the juice from a past experience, to awaken. You know?
Yeah, hell yeah.
I'll just share one.
Yeah.
I don't know where this video's going, but earlier this year, my girlfriend of 4 years, I was on retreat for 3 weeks, silent retreat, phone off.
Yeah.
And towards the end, I felt something's up, and I ring her up. I'm like, "What's going on?" And she says, "I'm leaving you."
Wow.
I was like, "Have you found someone else?" She's like, "Yeah." "Who is it?" "Dave."
Right.
He was one of my best mates.
Wow.
And it was just like,
that's heavy.
Bricks.
Yeah. 4 years as well, right?
We were together for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then straight away it was like, okay, this is the most intense emotional experience I've ever had. But it was right, how do I be free in this? How do I be free in this? And that evening I didn't sleep a wink. I sat up in my bed, spine completely straight in bed, and I was like, I'm going to try this evening to not suffer.
Wow.
And if I lay down and put my head on the pillow, I'd go into thoughts of them having sex together, thoughts of them doing this, thoughts of them doing that. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
How do I not suffer? Sit up, become aware of the thinking, really, really fucking aware of it. What's moving in my body, staying completely present with everything in my spine. And I got to a point where it was just like waves and waves of bliss and vastness just opening. Like the most blissed out, open, spacious state of consciousness I'd been in. And that was through the most difficult thing that had happened to me, you know. That's
really interesting. How did you feel like after that? Like obviously knowing that knowledge and you're having to carry that with you, how long were you on the retreat for, and how did that affect your kind of relationship to the breakup?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard, but it didn't devastate me. It was hard, but it didn't throw me off.
Yeah.
Like there was waves of, like I say, opening to really amazing states of consciousness through the pain, and then there would be a wave of me feeling awful and ringing my mum and crying. But I just let myself go through fully through the whole human experience, whatever needed to move.
Nice.
At the same time, my attention was on freedom. It was like staying focused on freedom, and at the same time letting the human do whatever it needed to do to grieve. I cried every day for 3 months, and I got very fucking angry, and I got angry towards people, and I expressed that anger because I didn't want to repress. I wanted my human self to just let it out, get it out.
Don't have the filter.
Yeah, but at the same time, I didn't want to have it make me suffer. And of course I suffered at times. But very much there was a lot of freedom in that experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I had a similar-ish experience actually where I just was having a breakup and went into a retreat where it was like we were on and off for like maybe 6 months, and then it was like finalized, it's over. And I remember it was silent as well. After maybe like 4 or 5 days, I noticed what you're describing of this, like I couldn't stop my mind going to those very dark places as to what's actually she's doing right now, and how having sex with someone else, or and then all of a sudden, like you said, just had this insight, like, oh, they're just thoughts. No, that's not happening right now in my actual experience. I have no idea. In a sense, she doesn't exist right now in this moment. And then it turned the tides.
Oh yeah, exactly.
But you're so right. I remember like sitting there. I remember we got given this cell. Like it's just like this padded room, and just there's just so much. Because like when you are actually like conversing with reality, so much of it's like imprinting onto you. I could see how the relationship was like embedded maybe in my liver, or it's just crazy, isn't it? The level of attachment that comes. It's nuts. Until it starts coming out, like whether it's for a breakup or like a catastrophic moment that you don't realize, and then you're like, it's all coming up. And that's kind of like what you were saying earlier about why we avoid things and are distracted, because we're like maybe unconsciously bringing things into our life as well. Yeah, amazing.
Well, another interesting point, you say that the stuff from the relationship stays locked into the body, or you notice it coming up in the body after the breakup. Well, I was driving my car, and I think I'd looked at a photo of the girl, and I started crying, and then I started screaming, and then I started really screaming, and then this voice came out of me, which said, my babies, and then poof, like this pain in my heart just exploding out. And my mum had lost 2 babies before I was born. And I interpreted that, and I really think it's true, that somehow through the breakup,
100%.
I was processing the pain of my mum's grief from losing those babies through the breakup. It's like somehow I got attached to my ex in a way that was sort of similar to my mum's unexpressed love towards these babies that had died.
That would make total sense.
And then through that experience, it actually poured through my heart and through my belly.
Yeah.
You know?
That makes sense, because obviously you were in the womb as she's processing that information, so it's like data being downloaded into your hard drive.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, obviously because it happened so long ago and before, like, you know, you were born in a sense.
Yeah.
That as an event like that would kind of bring it out. That's nuts.
And that's another thing.
Did you know? Did you know that she'd lost? Obviously, you did, right?
Yeah, I knew. Yeah, I knew, but I didn't make up that. My babies, it just came. What the hell? I haven't had any babies. Yeah. You know.
Jesus.
And I know my mum carries that grief.
Wow.
But that goes back to what we were saying. Like, I love the saying, "Everything's here to help you. Everything's here to help you awaken.
Yeah.
Or everything's here to help you heal. You know, even the worst things are here to help you.
Help you kind of
your pain, or even like generational pain.
Yeah.
Life is trying to liberate us.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's just every time you feel pain, it's just showing you what you're not, in a sense, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, beautiful.
Yeah.
Any other points to add, or?
No, I don't think so, man. Yeah. All good. Nice chatting.
Definitely. I think that takeaway of this conversation is that whatever's happening in each moment, there is context to it. It's not random, and with the right perception, that you can actually see that your life's on a longer journey to something beautiful if you're open to that being potentially the case.
100%. Yeah. And that's it. Like, somehow there's something to do with willingness. Like, you have that knowledge and you have that willingness to use life to open you to something beautiful. Yeah.
And
somehow the willingness helps make that the case. If someone doesn't have that knowing, or doesn't have that willingness, they can just repeat patterns until they die.
Yeah, totally.
But if you get that willingness and that knowing, maybe even at an early age.
Yeah. Would you say that's what grace is?
What, the knowing?
Yeah.
I guess that is grace.
Yeah.
Where else would that come from?
Yeah, it's mad. That's...
Yeah.
I love that. Have you ever there's a story called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Do you know that story? So it's a true story. There's a movie about it. This guy, he has a stroke in his car, and he gets locked-in syndrome, so he can't move anything but his left eye, I think. So he can only wink. That's it. And he gets taken to a hospital, and the only way he can communicate is if they say the alphabet, and he has to spell out the words that he wants her to like know what he's trying to say. And the first words he says is "kill me," and they're well, we can't. Euthanasia is not legal in this country, or whatever. So he stays alive, and he manages, kind of like what you're saying, to switch it completely around, and he writes a book through winking.
Wow.
Yeah. It's nuts. Yeah.
Oh, I'd like to read that.
Yeah. It's called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and it's like 100%. I mean, worst case scenario, isn't it? Like, everything's shut down apart from you can only wink.
Yeah.
But he was still able to find that almost like inner strength, or like it in and of itself.
Well, he must have let go of resistance.
Yeah.
It's only resistance which causes suffering. So he must have let go of resistance, and sometimes it's such a blessing to get put in such an extreme.
Yeah, it is.
It was immense suffering or freedom. He only had the choice between that: immense suffering or freedom. There was no middle ground. If there's a middle ground, then that's you want it to be. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because I just said earlier, it's like, have you ever heard that saying, the good's the enemy of the great? Have you ever heard that? It's kind of like articulating that point that, if you're in a middle ground, you're not steering in either direction. And sometimes that can almost be worse. Because you're right, like, I would agree, like, some of my greatest moments, in fact, they all have come out of extreme suffering.
Same.
Nuts, isn't it?
Yeah. Sometimes now my suffering's getting quite a lot less. Sometimes I think like, ooh.
Oh, really?
Like,
when's it coming?
But no, that's definitely enough. I don't want to put that out to the universe. Like,
definitely. I mean, there's a guy that I know that got Lyme's disease, and he was like on the non-dual path. Yeah. And he was
Is that Jeff Foster?
Yeah. And yeah, he went through some tough times. Did you read his kind of post about
I was reading it as it was happening. Yeah.
I felt terrible for him, and but so I guess the point that I was making with that is that it can also humble the hell out of you, because I've been have you ever had it where like I'm like, I've got this, you know, like there's nothing, and then something happens and it just completely switches the whole thing on its head, and you're like, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever got to the point where I thought I got this.
And maybe that's it, isn't it? It's like being a human, you never necessarily get it, but that's okay. I don't know though. I don't want to like put a limit on the human experience, because maybe there is an experience where you do completely transcend. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Let's find out as best we can. For sure.
Nice. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to chat, man.
Yeah.